Cory, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Which part of the world are you at right now, man? You're way overdressed for the podcast. This is a good joke to start with. Where are you right now?
I'm in Danville, California, over in the East Bay, San Francisco.
Very nice. So you're in the thick of things, if you will, so to speak. How's the mood in San Francisco and California and NorCal, given this AI boom from OpenAI, Anthropic, and everything else? What are you seeing?
I think you see sort of a mix of people who are very excited about it, and excited about the possibility with some folks who, think it's going to take over the world and be a very bad thing, and other people who I'm seeing both in my family and in the larger business community that are a little trepid about using it and what it could do with the data that it receives, and so are more hesitant and kind of leaning into it.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Awesome. Corey, give us a 2-minute background of yourself. Start all the way from maybe what the story arc is. Usually, our readers want to understand, listeners want to understand what's the story arc of this person before they get a little bit of context. Talk us through what are the experiences that led you to where you are.
Yeah, so I started off in engineering, aerospace engineering with Northrop Grumman many, many, many years ago. Got into management marketing consulting and started working with a bunch of SMBs. That's when I got a taste into go-to-market, and then got into the solar industry. Started off as a commercial solar salesperson, and then kind of rose through the ranks over the next 8 years in the solar industry. And then after that, had a couple different stops in various technology firms. So had an energy tech with solar, auto technology with telematics, finance tech when I was inside of the solar industry, and then property technology where I was head of sales for a prop tech firm that was Series B, C, D. I was CEO of a private equity-backed ADU company in the prop tech space as well. Spent several years as a COO of a marketing technology company, and am now doing RevOps and GenAI consulting for a RevOps consulting agency. I also did my undergrad in engineering many years ago, and then got my MBA at Wharton about 8 or 9 years ago.
That's a ridiculously good background. I'm jealous of a lot of different things. First, I'm jealous of the fact that you had fintech, prop tech, so many different areas to work on. I've been pretty much in, you would call infrastructure tech and apps tech, and the only branch out was e-commerce. And I quickly came back to B2B software tech more than anything
Mhm.
else. So I'm jealous of the fact that you had so many good experiences. Okay, what made you focus on GTM and RevOps now? Because you've had experiences in solar, you've had experiences in property stuff, you've had experiences in fintech. Why RevOps? Why GTM? Why now?
So RevOps is kind of been an underpinning of what I have been doing through most of my career, the better part of 20 20 almost 25 years in business. So RevOps is kind of a theme that I've been in for a good chunk of my career. I love operations. I love processes. I have been part of leading many initiatives where there's been transformative change across the company when we set up the right systems and processes, and implementing that in go-to-market is, I think, extremely critical to scale companies. And I think right now in particular, where we sit with generative AI, there are a lot of businesses that are trying to figure out how to implement it, and facing pressure from their boards, facing competitive pressure. I think boards and CEOs and heads of sales and heads of revenue have just a tremendous amount of pressure on them to get ahead and lead the way for their business in generative AI. So I am here because I was an executive. I felt that pressure. it was more externally facing or, externally generated, that I was in a market, we were selling chat services. That was changing very dramatically. And I knew if we weren't going to be leading, we were going to be falling behind. I
Mm-hmm.
did a training for my sales team, or from my leadership team not too long ago. And one of the talks that we listened to and discussed was Jack Welch. You're familiar with Jack Welch, a former
Yeah.
CEO of GE. And in that talk, he was talking about the transition to internet
Mm-hmm.
and how he knew that if his company, if GE wasn't leading in the space of the internet and implementing that in every aspect of their business, they were going to fall behind pretty dramatically. I think
Yeah.
this is our internet moment. And I think this is an opportunity for companies either to lead and lead very dramatically by putting generative AI at the center of their business, or very, very, very quickly fall behind.
Tell me about for 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 a lot of people, RevOps is maybe not a term they use every day. They may not be familiar with it. Tell us the different. I've heard of marketing operations. I've heard of
Mhm.
sales operations. I've heard of customer service operations. But RevOps is kind of a new term. Tell me, what does it encompass? How is it different from maybe these, or is it an umbrella term? Walk us through what RevOps is versus all these other things.
Yeah, so that's a great question. What RevOps is really those three things combined into one department.
Yeah.
So instead of marketing having their own separate operations, sales having their own set of operations, customer success having their own set of operations, finance kind of pulling their own bits of data, you have one department really that is outsourcing their services to marketing and sales and customer success and finance, but oftentimes will sit as a separate department that is really focused on improving the efficiency. So it's kind of a focus on your systems, on your data, and streamlining the whole kind of operational center of the business that's generating revenue.
Got it. When I talk to CROs, chief revenue officers, one of the big questions I always hear is why is alignments between marketing, sales, and customer success so hard to achieve? And one of the answers I've heard is because they have different priorities, different focus,
Mhm.
different measurements and metrics. In
Mhm.
your experience, you've done a lot of different industries. Many industries don't have the silos. They have usually one team, one person, one aligned metric. When you talk to your customers, is this an issue of alignment and metrics and goals? Or is RevOps really the ability for a customer to finally say, listen, the only thing that matters is revenue and profit, not how many website visitors we get, or not how many sales calls that salespeople made, but they didn't actually close, or how many customer service requests we took as opposed to resolve.
Mhm. So I think that what is really important there is top level alignment. And
Mhm.
so for example, building out a set of OKRs and saying this is the big thing that we want to achieve. And then these are the big initiatives that we want to achieve across the business. And then building sales and marketing and customer success and operations all have parts in helping to achieve that top level goal. And I think if there isn't top level alignment on the most important things that need to be done, that creates natural conflict between the departments. In addition, it's really important, and that's sort of been the genesis of a chief revenue officer. It's really important that there is a integrator in a role that is fully responsible with creating alignment between these different departments. And when natural conflict arises, which it absolutely will, and I think all of your listeners probably understand conflict as a constant inside of businesses. Um, you need somebody who can jump in and figure out what the problem is, what's the root of the problem, asking the five whys, and then solving kind of that core problem to create alignment between the departments. And so that can be ensuring that the right objectives are set for each individual and each department. It can be ensuring that compensation is aligned with the top level objectives inside of the business. It can be process agreement, SOP agreement between the different departments. It can be all of those things as a way to solve that. But you need kind of an integrator that can understand um, the core issue that needs to be solved and then launch into fixing that issue.
Got it. So tell me what has changed about GTM in your mind that AI now makes, I've heard about AI changing GTM. I've heard about agents
Yep.
being brought into GTM, which
Yep.
is probably one of those leaning forward things. But how, in your mind, walk us through what was RevOps 5 years ago and what made you, something in your head went, man, this is going to change. What was it maybe two, three, whatever, 5 years ago versus what is that you think it is right now? Let's talk about that. And then I want to talk about what do you think it is 5 years from now. But let's talk about 3 to 5 years ago, how was RevOps and how is AI changing it, or how are you helping change it?
Yeah, I mean, so I think traditionally RevOps is, what we all think of in terms of like marketing ops or sales
Yeah.
operations or customer success operations. That's sort of the traditional thing. Been in businesses for a long time. It's really just sort of ensuring that the center of the business operates, the center of the business from a revenue perspective operates extremely well. At this point with generative AI, like if we just don't even look at all the various tools that exist out there, you just look at ChatGPT or Gemini, what you can do with those tools is amazing.
Yeah.
For example, doing account plans. So you can build a gem in Gemini that will you can say, all right, I am want to target this particular company, and here's their website. Here's some information about our product. Go do research on it. Tell me about their pressures that are happening in their industry right now, um, who their competitors are and how their competitors are advancing against them. What do you think their top priorities are as a business? What do you think their top priorities as a business are that relate to the areas that we solve inside of our company?
Mm,
What types of systems are they using? How would we position ourselves against those systems? Should we directly attack those systems? Should we bolt on the side of their existing systems? So it gives you an approach plan. And then it can even help to build a email cadence for you, a call cadence, talk tracks. It can do all of that. And this isn't just things that are far off or difficult to do. It's things that you could do in 15 minutes with sitting down with ChatGPT and doing that. So that's account plans. We have a client right now that is utilizing it for their quarterly business reviews. So they will load in customer data and usage data. They'll outline some of the other tools that they have and ask it to build out a QBR that uses some of those same things from the account plan that we talked about a minute ago, and then ties it together with the systems that they are utilizing and how effective it is, and then gaps that it believes are in their usage where the customer could probably get a lot more value if they leaned into it. Another
yeah.
is building. So I have a client right now that is has generated a new Gen AI product. And
Hmm.
so I have sat down with, and they need to build out an entire go-to-market. They need to identify who the target customers, the best target customers that will
ICP.
most likely say, yeah, who their ICP is. Build out a messaging framework, build out a go-to-market plan, both a PLG motion and an SLG motion, which is product-led growth, so things that marketing would do, and then sales-led growth, things that the sales team would do. Um, And I sat down with ChatGPT yesterday, went back and forth with it to really get a very good understanding of this particular product. It's highly technical. So I had it explain it to me, and then I had it explain it to me as if I was an eighth grader that was semi-technical but not a programmer. And it walked me through kind of a methodology and kind of broke it down to imagine you gave a robot your key card. And so it kind of explained it in a way that really helped me understand it. And then I went back and forth with it several times to say, okay, this is my understanding of these four components that you just mentioned. And I explained it, and then it went through and it corrected me and said, you basically have it. Here's some tweaks that I'm going to make. And I did that a couple times until I fully grasped and was able to explain to ChatGPT what I thought this system did. After I did that, then I could sit down and start to work through the best potential customers
Yeah.
for this particular product and built out some ideas on the ICP. And then worked through some ideas on both a PLG motion and an SLG motion. I mean, I was able to do all of this in less than 2 hours, something that it would
Wow.
have taken consultants, several weeks to do. I could do very, very quickly. Now that has allowed me to be able to take a lot of this information and go back to our client to begin to validate some of these ideas that we're generating that actually I think are super exciting. I mean, really, really, really exciting, and some pretty out of the box ideas here too.
Let me ask you something, Corey. Have you used custom GPTs and have you built any project automation GPTs? Do you fine tune your LLM? Do you do any amount of what they call system prompt management? Do you do any of those things, or are you still one of those, okay, I'm starting to use GPT a lot more, but I've not built custom GPTs yet?
So I haven't built custom GPTs. Our company has built quite a few of them, and so I use them as resources. Uh, I have recently started using the projects in ChatGPT, which allows me, like for this particular client that we have, to load in customer information, use cases, their pitch deck, a lot of their messaging, and so on. And then I can ask it questions and I can have it build out sort of messaging frameworks based on all of the decks. And I have, 20, 30, 40 different components that can be fed in. And then it can use other external sources and the data that I've input there in order to improve the output. And I found that that's very cool. The other cool thing about projects is so you can give it specific instructions and say, you are this kind of business or you whatever you are, like this is your position inside of the company. These are some support documents. These are our knowledge base. And then it can remember that from chat to chat to chat. So you're not starting over from scratch each time. You can so I was working on some stuff yesterday and I had an idea last night. And this morning I went back to the same project and asked it some questions and it was able to generate responses. So it continues that same sort of thread of thinking. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Let me ask you something about one of the things that you mentioned. You talked about ICP and you talked about personas, right? Increasing number of customers I'm talking to don't want to spend, I can understand why. If you look at the old, what you would call intent and ICP platforms, they are expensive. They are, in some cases, they start at 50,000 and they go up higher to,
Mhm.
six figures at minimum, right? And if you're talking about startups that are maybe Series A or even earlier than Series A, $100,000 to spend on a intent platform with ICP and persona stuff is expensive. Um, how have you recommended people to get started? Let's say they're a small company. They're about, and increasingly, as you know, many of the companies in the US, especially in California, are being told, don't hire people, just hire
Mhm.
robots or
Yeah.
agents, whatever the heck that means,
Yeah.
right? And I've seen some org charts with head of marketing, and then 50 agents under them with different titles, right?
Yeah,
ICP agent, person. I don't. I'm making all this up in terms of
right.
the names, but I've seen org charts. You've seen them too, right? Where they put a bunch of agent names and say agents. How real is that? How far do you think we're away from Cory being the single person marketing GTM sales executive, and then having a bunch of 20 agents and Cory being the master puppet master type of thing?
So I think we are very close to that. And again, I also think it depends on the level of technology used inside of a business, right? If you have a manufacturing company that's been around for 100 years, family owned, they're in Ohio or Pennsylvania or some of these places, they might be much slower to uptake on technology.
Yeah, yeah.
I sit in the heart of, sort of Silicon Valley here, technology firms. I think technology firms are running very, very quickly to that. And so you have sort of this whole range of, 100-year-old. My wife works for a 100-year-old Japanese firm, and they are much, much slower on the uptake of using generative AI inside of their company. But you look at, don't quote me on this, but I think you probably now have to quote me on this because we're on a podcast. But I think I had heard maybe a week ago that OpenAI has maybe 1,000 engineers and they're building 1 million AI agent engineers. And when you build that sort of scale inside of a business, it's hard to for other companies to catch up. So I think that there is a very cool opportunity right now in the marketplace
Mhm.
to be an implementer and an integrator for generative AI companies. And so
Yeah,
that
yeah.
is why I'm doing RevOps, generative AI consulting, because I think that this is the place to be right now. I think people who are building or roles and professions that are figuring out how to integrate generative AI into marketing and sales and building agents in the core operations of the business, I think that's the place to be. And I think in a handful of years, it's probably not that far. It is going to be harder and harder for somebody who does not have generative AI skills to find a job. And I think that we will start to see, more significant layoffs in the white collar workforce for people who are not advancing their skills here and advancing them very, very quickly.
Let me talk about skills and we will wrap this up. Cory, you have a background in marketing. You've done sales. RevOps, by default, when someone says ops to a title, means there's some kind of technical inclination. They could be on the spectrum of I am a developer all the way to I am a orchestrator of workflows and I can do some low code, no code stuff and I can figure
Mhm.
things out, right? And you're just telling me just the previous 2 minutes, there's going to be a lot of changes to the job. I'm not going to mention layoffs because I can see it already, right? There are going to be a lot of role changes, job changes, and there are multiple factors hitting us at the same time besides AI. There's also the Section 174 ruling on tax laws, which is a big bad for big tech because they have to now amortize their R&D spending over 5 years, which means their tax bill goes up, which is why a lot of the big tech companies are reducing their headcount, right? Because now they have to, their cash flow is worse
Mhm.
than 5 years ago. Their expenditures out of pocket for taxes is worse than 5 years ago. So what can they do? And they're spending a lot more on capex for
Mhm.
all this generative AI cloud stuff. So they have to reduce their headcount. It makes sense. My question to you is, if you're a person, and whatever your background, I've had an engineering background, you've had both an engineer and marketing and all of those kinds of backgrounds. How would you think about if you were to advise someone who's mid-career executive, not coming out of college, not someone who's as old as me, a mid-career executive, what would you advise them on the way to shift and shape their career over the next months to year to make themselves well prepared for 2027, 2028,
Yep.
2030?
So my biggest recommendation, I would have two recommendations. One is keep ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever your LLM of choice is, have it open on your desktop all the time and invite it to the table with everything that you're doing. When you're writing emails, invite it to the table. That's sort of the lowest bar. But when you need a thought partner on something, when you're trying to brainstorm, invite it to the table. Brainstorm with the chat GPT or with the LLM. When you need to learn something, ask the LLM and then have it explain it to you like you're an eighth grader. And go back and forth and check your knowledge with it. Just invite it to the table, invite it to the table, invite it to the table. This is something that Ethan Mollick, who is a Wharton professor and one of their lead AI researchers, one of his biggest recommendations is always invite it to the table. The second would be to spend a little time each week training yourself on generative AI. There's Coursera, there's a lot of different AI education platforms that you can use. The Neuron has some great training and a great newsletter. And there are a number of other resources out there, but spend a little time, at least 30 minutes a week, brushing up and improving your skills. And if you do that, then I think that puts you ahead of a very large percentage of the population. And I would say for most people, your job is more secure as you are learning how to utilize AI in your particular niche.
Yeah. So you're saying training and learning, and you're saying invite to the table, meaning use it as much as you can
That's
constantly,
right.
because you will get to know the limitations, you will get to know what it's good at, you'll get to
hmm
know when it hallucinates
hmm
consistently and when it does not, so on and so forth, right? Any parting thoughts on what to do if you are in a position where you might suspect that the job is going to get automated because of AI? What would you do if you think in about 3 to 6 months time using AI? It's really great because I can do the job in 2 minutes and I can go drink coffee while it does the job. But that means that in 3 months, your boss gets to know this and he's going to say, why am I paying this guy again if AI is doing most of the work?
Yep.
What would I do to get ahead of that?
So I would assume that that is going to happen for most of us in our job and figure out how do you innovate your job description so that you can, and utilizing AI. Um, yeah, I think it's going to be an innovation in your job description. So that or it's a layoff. And I don't my hope is not that for people, right? My hope is that we have strong employment going forward in every, sort of industry. I don't think that's realistic. But if people are innovating their own job description, like for me, looking at saying, I think that the place to be is integrating this into companies, maybe that's the place to be. And so if your job is at risk in the very near term, I would be very much more aggressive, more than 15 or 20 or 30 hours or minutes a week in training yourself. Maybe you spend an hour or two or three or a Saturday every week learning how to do this. And maybe you help a lot of companies in this area, or you help them integrate. So maybe you move into a AI consulting role if you're in marketing or content creation or one of these different things. You figure out, how do I help companies to advance in this area and then go sell your services?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Corey. I'm going
My pleasure.
to definitely follow up with you sometime soon to make sure that we see progress on this. But this was a great show.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.